Hello, my name is Dylan Hoffman, and in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about patient education, especially on the healing process and the education that can go into that when we're talking with patients. So, to start off, I want to speak on the case synopsis that I'm going to be doing today. This patient is a 15-year-old female basketball player who suffered a grade 2 lateral ankle sprain. The injury happened on a Friday during a basketball game, but I did not get to evaluate the injury until the following Monday. So the patient had gone a few days without receiving an evaluation from me. They had no past medical history of an ankle sprain. When they came in, they were accompanied by the mother. The patient was using crutches that they had gotten from the mother that they had at the house and was non-weight bearing. The patient reported that they've been using ice and NSAIDs at least twice daily since the injury had occurred, and the mother was worried about a fracture. So they had been very non-active, really avoiding any kind of movement or stress on the ankle for these few days before coming in for an evaluation. As I started to evaluate the patient, I noticed that there was some minor swelling around the lateral aspect of the ankle, but there was no point tenderness on the medial lateral malleolus, base of the fifth, the navicular, on the calcaneus, etc. And so adding that with the fact that even though it was painful, the patient was able to walk more than 4 steps, even if they were walking with an antalgic gait. And so that really, looking at the outer ankle rules, helped solidify my understanding that this was likely not a fracture. Did an anterior drawer test, which was positive. And that brings us to a diagnosis of a grade 2 lateral ankle sprain. So, after you go through your evaluation, and you should always include your patients in that evaluation, it brings you to the most important aspect, really, of your interaction with any patient, and in this case, the patient and the mother, the parent. And that's their education and how you're going to educate them on the injury. The first thing you should always do is address the patient and parent fears. And if you haven't figured out what those fears are, you should do that in your evaluation. When you're asking your subjective history questions, you should be able to get a bit of an understanding of what their fears are. And if you're not, simply ask them, is there anything you're worried about? What are your thoughts on this, etc.? So for this patient, I really just explained why I did not suspect that there was a fracture. That was the mother's biggest worry. They were fully ready to go and take her in to get an x-ray. Luckily, one of the coaches had actually told her to wait and see me first. And so speaking with the family, I told them, looking at the patient, there's really, really good research that shows that if we're able to touch in these different places around the ankle, that these are the areas we usually have fractures at. And so if there's no pain in there and they're able to walk on it, the research really shows that there's no need to go get an x-ray. And obviously, if you still would like to, I'll support that decision. But from my perspective, I do think that there is a very low likelihood of there actually being a broken bone. And so addressing that fear with the patient kind of helped them feel better about the situation. Once you've addressed those fears, then we can move on to discussing, okay, what do we do next? And this is where that explanation of the healing process happens, right? And so The patient was still in a lot of pain, and I'll tell them, okay, the inflammation stage, as soon as you get hurt, that inflammation stage is gonna last anywhere between at least 3 to 5 days, and so letting the patient know you're still in that phase of acute inflammation, or at least subacute now inflammation, and so I tell the patient, hey. You're still in this inflammation phase. It's still going to hurt. There's going to be some discomfort. Know that you are progressing out of that stage pretty easily. And as we're progressing out of it, your body's going to start laying down some tissues to help this heal, um, to help your ankle heal. And as your body's doing that, your body really needs to have the energy and the ability to lay this stuff down. Um, I can explain, with the patient as well, that using ice and using, uh, you know, Advil or ibuprofen or Aleve or any of these NSAIDs, um, I understand why you're doing it, and it's most likely for pain, and it's great, especially using the ice. I have no problem using it as soon as the injuries happen. But now that we're a few days after, and that inflammation phase is kind of coming to an end, we really want to help the body be able to heal. And just like when you are standing outside and it's really cold outside, you don't want to move a lot. Your cells in your body do the same thing. All of these cells and proteins that are coming there and trying to help, uh, when they're cold, they don't want to move either. And so we really, at this point, want to give them a good environment that they can start healing things quickly. And if we ice it too much, we may actually slow that healing process down. Um, the same goes with these anti-inflammatories. Inflammation is a natural part of healing, and we need inflammation because that's us sending all of this material and all of these people down, or these cells down to this area so we can heal it. And so we want to make sure that we're um, not using too much ice and NSAIDs. Uh, I will say, if it helps with pain and you're just in a ton of pain, then it's okay to ice it for 15 minutes. Uh, or you can even take some Tylenol. If you want to continue to take Tylenol instead of the ibuprofen, that would be, in my opinion, a better option because you won't have so much swelling, or you won't have such a negative effect on the healing process. And then, really, if you're not in a ton of pain, there's no huge reason to ice this far out of the injury now. Along with that, too. Uh, Here in the next few days, the next week, the next 2 weeks, you're going to have a lot of tissues being laid down um, to heal, and we want to make sure that these tissues are being laid down in the right patterns, and we really do that through moving the body part a lot. And so, if we can try and wean off of these crutches to do a lot more movements, and now I'll teach you some guys some exercises and movements that we can do. There's really good research out there that's showing that early movement and early use of your ankle is actually going to help you improve a lot quicker. And so these are things that I would discuss with the patient as far as their plan of care. And then at the end of that education, you really want to summarize your overall conversation. So I may ask the patient, how do you feel about this? Do you have any questions? And address any of those questions they may have. If they have questions about, well, will them walking on it hurt it worse? I can say, as long as we're being safe with it and we're not doing anything that's going to put them at a high risk, that walking on it, using the ankle and trying to use it as normal as possible will actually help us recover quicker. And there's some really good research out there that supports that as well. Um, ask the patient's input. if they ask, okay, well, what can we do? If the patient has concerns about maybe completely eliminating their use of crutches, then I can maybe say, okay, why don't we use one crutch and we'll be able to walk, but still have the support of that crutch, so that we can start to get used to that movement. Or maybe I can encourage, if you're going to be, going to the mall and spending the whole day at the mall, maybe you want to take the crutches so you're not overdoing it, but let's not use crutches when we're walking around our house or we're going short distances. Um, and that brings me to the last point of the summary, which is give the patient options and give the patient alternatives. So I can say, I recommend not using ice, but if you would like to use ice for 10 minutes to help with pain, if the pain is really bad, then I'm okay with that. Um, but maybe after you ice, make sure you do all of these rehab exercises. Or I give an alternative of, if the ibuprofen is really helping with pain and you feel like you're in a lot of pain afterwards, instead of taking that, maybe we can take some Tylenol and do some exercises and see if that improves. So give the patient options. And that brings me to the take-home points of any patient conversation, not specifically this one of an ankle sprain, but any conversation you're going to have with the patient. Is include the patient in your decision making. I can say from personal experience, this is something that I sometimes struggle with, but make sure that you're including the patient in their decision making, because it's their body and their life, and they have a voice in how they're going to be taken care of. Give the patient options. I've talked about that. Explain your reasoning on why you feel one option is the best, but give them alternatives. Let them know you can keep icing if that's how you feel, or you can keep using the crutches. It may be more comfortable for you. Just know that it might cause the ankle to take a little longer to heal, right? And so give them some options. Let them know what the consequences or benefits of those options are. You can help them with understanding, as I said, using metaphors, images, models, and be really creative when you're doing this. A lot of people may say, I can't because I don't have a budget to buy, a model of the spine or a model of the ankle or of the knee and this and that. You don't have to use something around, I used a metaphor of being outside and you're really cold and you don't want to move, and how our cells do the same thing at a cellular level. And so be creative, use those metaphors, images, and models to help the patient understand during the education, and then check to make sure they're understanding. Ask questions, ask for clarity if they say something, or if they have questions, and just make sure that there is some understanding going on there too, because what you don't want to do is talk the patient not understand or not receive the information, and then you leave thinking you've done a great job of educating when you really have not. So check for understanding and make sure that the message you're trying to get across is getting across. And then whatever the patient decides to do, you need to have some respect for that decision and make sure that not only are you including the patient in the decision making, but if a patient decides to do something, in this case, the patient decides to continue using the crutches, um, you have to respect their decision. You can let them know what the consequences of that may be, but don't blame or judge the patient because of the decision, and continue to provide as much support you can based on what they do. So hopefully this was informative for my viewers, and that you'll leave here being able to improve on your patient education.